What is going on, Notre Dame fans? I'm Mike Singer from blueandgold.com, and I'm joined by beat writer Tyler Horka. Give a preview of Notre Dame, Wisconsin, a battle in Soldier Field this Saturday at noon. Really intriguing matchup with some key storylines. We're going to break that down. Make sure you hit the thumbs up on this video to help support what we're doing here at blueandgold.com, and subscribe to our channel if you have not yet. Now, the big storyline is pretty obvious, Tyler. It is the battle of Jack Coan versus his old squad. You know, this is certainly a game that he's had circled on his calendar, regardless if he would admit it. And, Notre Dame head coach Brian Kelly and Wisconsin head coach Paul Chryst both talked about it during their weekly press conference, and we're going to get Tyler's reaction to that. But first, let's hear what Chryst had to say, or what he didn't have to say about Jack Coan.
Paul, what, if anything, looks different about Jack during his 3 games at Notre Dame compared to when he was here? And how strange do you think it'll be with him on the other sideline, given the relationship you developed with him?
Yeah, I think that, as you watch and you see it, I mean, obviously there's enough different team, and yet, he's always going to work and continue to work to improve. And I think it's, certainly that there's a story line, and yet I think it's important that it's Wisconsin versus Notre Dame, and yet I think that obviously we have a lot of respect for Jack, and appreciate who he is as a person and a player here, teammate, but it's Wisconsin versus Notre Dame.
All right, Tyler. So there's what Chris said. What was your reaction to hearing that? And then let us know, what did Kelly have to say about this? Because, again, he downplayed it as well.
Yeah, it was pretty much exactly what I would expect someone in Paul Chryst's position to say. Look, I know Jack Coan and Paul Chryst spent 4 years together, and Jack Coan was the starter in 2019, all 14 games for Paul Chryst, and the Badgers, led them to a Rose Bowl, lost by 1 point to Oregon in that game. These guys have played in some meaningful games together, and obviously that grows a bond, and these two are connected in that way. But when it comes down to Wisconsin playing against Notre Dame at Soldier Field this Saturday, that's that, and that's what Paul Chryst said is, look, this isn't Jack Coan versus Graham Mertz. This isn't Jack Coan against his former team in Wisconsin. This is Wisconsin versus Notre Dame. So I guarantee you there are probably some things being said in both locker rooms behind closed doors about Jack Coan, and specifically for Jack Coan. I mean, look, if Jack Coan goes out and throws for 4 touchdowns and 300 yards and Notre Dame wins the game, you don't think that's going to mean a little more to him than beating Toledo or beating Purdue? It probably will, but like you said, Brian Kelly, we'll get to that now. He also said, look, Jack Coan wants to beat Wisconsin, yes, but he also wants to beat Cincinnati the next week. And then Notre Dame has some big games against Virginia Tech and USC and North Carolina. He wants to win all of these games. He transferred from Wisconsin to Notre Dame to play for a playoff contender, and that's what Notre Dame has been the last few years. That's what Notre Dame hopes to be under Jack Coan's leadership at quarterback. And it's looked a little shaky from the start here, but Notre Dame is still 3-0 with Jack Coan starting all 3 of those games. So that's why he's here. He didn't come to Notre Dame because he saw Wisconsin on the schedule and said, oh, look, I have a chance to play against my former team. No, this is just one of the 12 regular season games that Jack Coan signed up for when he transferred to Notre Dame, and that's what both head coaches said. They said that this is just another game, albeit a really big game, Jack Coan aside. I mean, this is a top 20 matchup, and College Game Day is there for a reason.
College Game Day, Fox Noon, big kickoff, whatever that's called, huge deal. I also want to say one thing. Jack Coan didn't come to Notre Dame because he got benched. That is 1,000% not true. You talk to people who cover Wisconsin, you just look at the facts of the situation. Coan was going into the 2020 season, that weird shortened season for the Big Ten. He was the starter, and then he got hurt in fall camp, and then he was available, I think, for the last game or 2. Right. And by that point, Graham Mertz had established himself as the QB1 for that team. And, why would you change that during that weird season? So that's something that I keep seeing, that Jack Coan, whether it's him a game manager or he got benched, it's just not true. Let's move into talking about something that Kelly also discussed, was he basically said that, the Notre Dame rushing attack is in a good spot. I'm kind of wondering, is that Kelly showing some public confidence? Because when you look at the stats, Notre Dame's averaging 2.9 yards per carry, 100 attempts, 317 net yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. And then you look at the opponents, they're averaging 4.2 rushing yards. That's just not really getting it done. Then you look at the average per game, Notre Dame, about 106 rushing yards per game. Their opponent's 146. So what'd you make of Kelly comments? What do you kind of think about the rushing attack for Notre Dame right now?
So he said it the first time after the Toledo game that, hey, this Notre Dame running attack, it's going to get to a point where we're going to be able to run the ball in every single situation that we want to. Short yardage, goal line, run the clock out. And I said, okay, I believe you. It's only been 2 games of the season. And, that's what Notre Dame is historically, is we're going to run it. And we're going to run it, and we're still going to run it successfully. Then he kind of force-fed it to us after the Purdue game. And now that's when and he being Brian Kelly, obviously, that's when I'm starting to kind of second guess it, in the sense that, okay, minus Kyron Williams' 51-yard rush that kind of put the game to bed there. You take that away, and Notre Dame rushed, for 70 yards at best in that game. And, I mean, you're talking about one run accounting for nearly half of your rushing total, or, well over a third of it. That's not very good. To me, running the football successfully is take a 80-yard drive, for example. You want to be able to run the ball 5, 6, 7 times for 5, 6, 7 yards a pop, get it down there and punch it in. That's just not happening with this Notre Dame running game right now. I don't see it happening against a team like Wisconsin that boasts one of the best rushing defenses in the country. I think there's a lot more problems on Notre Dame's hands with the running game than Brian Kelly is leading on. And again, maybe he's saying these things over and over to instill confidence in the team, or just kind of mask some of the things that haven't happened so far through 3 games. But I do think it's been very interesting that that's kind of been his mantra, and he's sticking to it, because it kind of goes against what we're looking at with all these numbers right there.
And looking down at the receiving numbers, just as a side note, there are 3 leading receivers who have double-digit receptions: tight end, running back. There's certainly a lot that this Notre Dame offense is leaving to be desired. Now let's go back and look at Wisconsin. You wrote a really good article at blueandgold.com, and as well as our magazine, Blue and Gold Illustrated. Headline: Bad News Badgers. You kill me with these puns in your opponent previews. Tell us about the strengths of Wisconsin. I would imagine that they're pretty similar to what they are every year with Wisconsin. They're a smash mouth football team. Paul Chryst. They're going to run the ball. Tell me about Wisconsin's strengths, and how do those things kind of match up with, what if Wisconsin's run offense is a strength, how does that compare to the Notre Dame run defense, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I definitely think that's strength on strength, because the Notre Dame defensive line has played pretty well. Probably had its best game of the season against Purdue there. I think Myron Tagovailoa-Amosa played really well. Kurt Hinish is always obviously plugging up the middle. I think he actually got the game ball as well from Brian Kelly after the game, just for Brian Kelly's a big preparation guy, and Kurt Hinish did more in the week leading up to that Purdue game to prepare that Notre Dame defense than anybody else from Kelly's perspective. So Wisconsin has 3 really good running backs, and they all complement each other in really good ways. They have the transfer from Clemson, Ches Malussi, who is honestly their kind of go-to guy. If there was a bell cow in that backfield, he would be the guy getting most of those carries. But they also have some home run hitters. Wisconsin has a junior in Isaac Garendo who can hit you from all over the field. He's kind of like a Chris Tyree in a way, in that he's special fast, super talented. And then there's also a redshirt freshman in Jalen Berger who comes in and kind of is their short yardage situation guy in a sense. So 3 really good running backs. That's kind of been Wisconsin's MO over the years, right? Really good offensive line, running backs that can hit you from all over the place. They have those. Throwing the football, though, Graham Mertz has not thrown a touchdown pass all season. So that's something to watch for. I know that the Notre Dame secondary is not going to take him lightly, and we talked about Jack Coan having maybe a little bit of special interest in this game. Obviously, Graham Mertz wants to beat the guy that a lot of people from both fan bases thought that maybe would still be Wisconsin's starter this season, right? Like you said, Jack Coan didn't lose that he didn't lose a battle to Graham Mertz. He got injured. Graham Mertz came in, played well enough to take the starting job there, and then when Jack Coan gets healthy, you don't want to create a quarterback competition in the middle of the season, and then the offseason comes around and Jack Coan says, "Hey, let me go start somewhere else," because that's just the situation that I'm in right now. So, defensively, Wisconsin obviously poses a lot of problems as well. We talked about Wisconsin being the best run defense in the country. They've only allowed 33 rushing yards per game. You got to remember that Wisconsin has only played twice, opened the season against Penn State, and then beat Eastern Michigan. So the sample size is really small, but we've seen Penn State get off to an awesome start to the season, up to number 6 in the AP poll, and Wisconsin held that team to 50 yards rushing. So both sides of the ball, Wisconsin's strengths are exactly what you'd think they would be. The line of scrimmage is where they have their bread and butter, and that's what it's going to be against Notre Dame as well. They're going to try to control that line of scrimmage.
Yeah, last time I checked the line for the game, Wisconsin was a 5.5-point favorite, which seems high to me because we just don't know much about Wisconsin, but Vegas knows its stuff. So that's probably a line I would stay away from. Last topic here on the Notre Dame side of things, look at the linebacker situation. Not only the snap counts, what is the health of this team? Does Notre Dame need to do anything to limit the snap counts of J.D. Bertrand? When you look at the breakdown there, Drew White and Bo Bauer, 36 snaps apiece. Jack Kaiser got in there 25 times, Isaiah Pryor, 28, and then Bertrand, 81. Is that a misprint? I think the crack staff might need to look that up to make sure it's not, the 81 snaps versus Purdue to bring his total to 220. Part of the reason he gets so many snaps, he's just so darn good. You don't want to take him off the field, and he can be good in run support and pass coverage.
Yeah, but it's a little different in the sense, Kyle Hamilton is also playing pretty much every snap, but it's a little different to play every snap as a safety than it is as a linebacker, J.D. Bertrand, who's led the team in tackles for 3 straight games. That's a physical toll that you take. It hasn't even been a month into the season, and you start to worry a little bit about Bertrand's longevity. Brian Kelly said in his press conference this week, he was asked, is Bertrand going to continue this? And Kelly said, he probably needs a break. Against a team like Wisconsin, though, these linebackers are going to be so important that I don't know how you take J.D. Bertrand off the field for a guy like Prince Colley, who's probably going to be his backup this week, a true freshman, just because, the injuries to Maris Leafau and Shane Simon, obviously. You don't have a lot of depth at linebacker for Notre Dame. That's you said there's 2 reasons J.D. Bertrand is playing all these snaps, because he's been really good and there's really nobody else to replace him with. So that's going to be interesting. Obviously, you see the snap counts there a little lower for Kaiser and Pryor. That was because Notre Dame played so much dime against Purdue, kind of pass-heavy attack, and it worked. Against Wisconsin, I don't think you're going to see as much dime because Wisconsin's going to try to run the ball. So those snap counts should be higher. But again, that's going to be a lot of 3 linebacker looks for Notre Dame, and Bertrand is obviously one of the 3 best, if not the best so far. So how do you take him off the field? I don't know. We're just going to have to see what Kelly does.
It's really interesting to look at the snap counts where it's basically flipped, where Bertrand in 2021 is playing so much more. And you look at 2020, he's playing so much less than White, Simon, and those guys. Did he get that much better? Was it a scheme thing? Was it just a bad decision by Clark Lee not to put him on the field? Yeah, I don't know. But certainly raises that question. Well, Tyler, appreciate you joining me. Appreciate you guys watching through the end of this video. Make sure you hit that thumbs up and lock into our blueandgold.com YouTube channel for all coverage of Notre Dame football.